It must be Thursday. Welcome to Learning Unwrapped, a talk show about your most important life skill, brought to you by International Broadcast Media. I am Dr. Nancy Sulla, the host of your show, and I am thrilled today to be starting this new show about learning. Every week, we are going to unwrap some aspect of learning because, let's face it, learning is foundational and fundamental to everything we do. So let's get started. I want to introduce my co-host today, who is a colleague of mine from IDE Corp, Innovative Designs for Education, where we work together. She is our Director of Educational Equity. Please welcome Shanae Buford.
Hi.
Hey, Shanae, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm all right. Living the dream. So tell me about something you learned this week.
So something I learned this week, because I'm actually the auntie on duty for my young nieces as my brother went to travel, is that babies require a schedule of bottle feedings and knowing what cry means what. So that's what I have learned in the past 24 hours.
Nice. Well, sure. We are going to be talking about engagement this week, which is it's a cornerstone of learning. I mean, it's, you and I obviously do a lot of work in this in schools, and, there's learning and there's learning. And I feel like everybody can learn something for the short term. Everyone can learn something for the test. But what do we need to do so that we have long-term retention of learning? I think that's what it's all about. We have three. For
sure, and engagement is key for that. And I know that's what we're going to talk about. So that's super exciting.
Yeah. So we have three great guests. The first, we'll bring them all in. And the first one is, I met Reed McMurray about 2 years ago, I think, when she was a second year teacher, and she was being trained in our framework for the Learner Active Technology Infused Classroom. And I remember sitting with her and talking about a unit she was designing with problem-based learning. And I just thought, she is going to be something else. She's going to tear up the world of teaching and learning. And so I would like to bring in now Reed McMurray, who is a teacher, second grade teacher in Fernbrook Elementary School in Randolph, New Jersey. Shout out to Randolph. Woo, woo.
Hi, how are you guys?
We're good.
Hey, Reed, how are you?
Good.
Awesome. So tell us, for our Learning Unwrapped, what is something that you have learned this week?
So this week was really exciting in the world of hybrid teaching. Microsoft Teams just unleashed breakout rooms, which we have all been very patiently waiting for. So that's really big in student engagement too. Now we get to go back to a little bit of normalcy, do some turn-in talks, more partner work. So it was really exciting to get to work with that this week.
That's fun.
Awesome.
And I know that with breakout rooms, I've been sharing with teachers who are working with the youngest students, you can even assign every student to their own breakout room so that they're working, but you can be popping in and out just as if you were walking over to their desks. You really can replicate the learning experience.
I did that today. Our reading groups went much smoother. I used to have to hop in a separate call and call them in and hope that they'd answer. But now I can hop back and forth with these. So it worked out really well today.
Awesome.
Thank you to Microsoft then.
For sure.
So I'm going to bring in our next guest, Amelia Larson, who I met, about 7 years ago or so. Amelia was an assistant superintendent in a school district. She had read my book, Students Taking Charge. The district had wanted to really work on student engagement, which is at the core of that book. And so she brought us in, and actually, because of Amelia and some of her colleagues, we actually launched our office in Florida. And then she is now, I got to get that title right, she is the Executive Vice President for Innovation and Academic Partnerships. I think I got that right. So come on in, Amelia, and tell me if I did.
You did. You absolutely did. So something I learned. Can I share two things I learned?
Yes, please.
So the first one was that Zoom has a annotating app that you can do all kinds of things with people live. So I can show them a line and say, tell me how you're feeling today, 0 to 10, and they can put a little symbol and shows who they are and how they are feeling. And I did not know about the annotating feature of Zoom. And then the other part is I'm a new grandmother, and I have a 7-month-old grandson and a 4-month-old grandson. And there's a new way of introducing food to kids right now that is very different from my time. And you sit the kids and you give them just cooked vegetables, but you don't have to mash it or blend it or anything. They pick it up with their hands, they feel it, and it works. And they are really happy about it. They love it. They make a mess.
Wow.
Good to know.
I had dinner there yesterday because I needed to see it face to face, and it was a black.
Good to know. Good to know. I was actually, I think, one of the few kids who actually liked spinach, and I blame that on Popeye. So I used to watch the show Popeye, and then I would be like, I want spinach too. All right, let's get in our third guest and final guest for today. So we are going to talk about football. Well, not that football, because Pete is from England. So he is actually the national lead for the foundation. Oh, I got to get this right. The national lead for the foundation phase of the Take two. The national lead of the foundation phase of the Football Association of England. Come on in, Pete Sturgis.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
My skills, which I have none.
Thanks for such a professional introduction. It was really good.
For sure. So tell us, what's something you've learned this week, Pete?
Well, I don't think mine's going to be as exciting as the other guys, because I have a weekly Spanish lesson, and my weekly Spanish lesson this week was about el pretérito, the preterite verb.
That's hard.
In my head, really.
So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, because if you're as old as I am, you need to be able to talk about the past, and the preterite is for completed actions in the past.
Oh, so tell us something.
En español,
Sí.
Hablo un poquito en español. Necesito practicar más. Mucho más.
Amelia,
he needs to practice more. He knows a little Spanish and he needs to practice more, right?
That's right.
High school Spanish coming back.
Well, thank you for sharing.
I'm from Brazil, so I know your soccer, your football. I like it.
Great.
Yes.
Is America the only country that calls football the other thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I got it right. Well, and that American football is a little disappointing to me today, because one of the things I learned this week was how to gracefully lose at your fantasy football team's league. So I was in first place, and I got totally trounced the last couple of weeks, and that's it. I'm not even in the playoffs. I was so disappointed.
So you learn to lose gracefully, which is always a good life skill.
It is.
It's an important skill.
For sure.
And how about a shout out to our live viewers who are so important?
Yes. So in the chat, which I see is popping right now, talk to us, live chat, our live audience, something that you've learned this week. Go ahead and pop it in the chat for us so that we can find out what everyone's really taking in.
What have you learned? And we are very grateful to our live audience. I know, just like the way I watch a lot of television shows, it's easier to just record them and watch when it's convenient. We really want to create a show where we can create a thread of a conversation between our participants that are in the virtual studio over here and those of you who are at home. So we hope that throughout, as we talk about engagement, you will give us your ideas. You will ask questions. You will make comments. So just join in the conversation.
Yes, it makes it that much more engaging, if you will.
Oh, my buddy Mark Lee is here. He lost in the first round of playoffs this year. Oh, already. Shout out to Mark Lee, because the interesting thing, my path to this moment where we are all sitting here on this show, I was asked to do a podcast, and then someone saw me on that podcast and asked me to be on their show, and Mark saw me on that show and asked me to be on his show, and then before you know it, here I am. So thanks, Mark, for introducing me to the international broadcast media, because it's great to be here. All right, let's get into talking a little bit about engagement. And what I like to say is engagement is about grappling. Now,
Yes.
we're going to go way back to ancient Rome. It was at 260 BC, I think, when the Romans actually invented this iron hook, which was called a grapple. And they used it. It was used at the time if you were trying to overtake another ship. You would literally hook your grapple on, and it would allow you to seize and hang on to another object. And then fast forward into wrestling. The idea of wrestling is that you hold, manipulate, control, maneuver the other player without smacking them in the face, and it's called grappling. And if we now apply that to learning, think, if you will, about when you learn or when children learn, they have to take a concept or a skill and they have to really work with it, hang on to it, persist through it, grapple with it. So that's what I like to talk about, grappling. So I know each of our three guests here today have interesting experiences with getting people grappling and engaged. And Reed, I'm going to start with you and ask you to share a bit about that amazing summer program and how you got little first and second graders, actually incoming first and second graders, so even younger, grappling. So tell us about it. How did you engage?
Definitely. So this summer, Randolph offered a 10-day enrichment course, and I got to work really closely with a colleague of mine. She works at another elementary school, Trish Burke, and we got to design a program, and we kind of had a little freedom with it. So we were thinking about the coronavirus because the kids really do. They like to talk about it. They like to know why we're home, why everything is different, but it obviously could be a touchy subject. So we wanted to twist it a little bit and have a little positivity in it. So we introduced them with the problem of how can they help to reopen Randolph. We knew that the new school year was coming and the ending of the last school year was just so abrupt. So we wanted them to be a part of it. So we introduced this to our kids to kind of kick it off, and they really started to run with it. They were able to do a bunch with it. They designed 6 feet tools that would help them safely social distance. They designed masks that would help them keep safe. They even designed games that they could play where they would be socially distanced if they were in-person games, or they even designed virtual games. So we gave them the freedom to be able to schedule their days and pick and choose the tasks that they wanted to do while teaching the standards through it.
That's pretty cool. And how was the level of engagement?
For a 10-day course, the amount that these students were able to do was amazing. They created commercials for their products. They advertised them. And at the end of the 10 days, they were really able to have some stakeholders in it. They presented to our town mayor, and they presented to our administration staff and our board members.
I think you brought up
that is awesome.
Yeah, you brought up an important part of engagement, which is having a real world audience to whom to present or for, to perform.
Right.
Definitely, it was something that it affected their everyday life. They wanted to be able to do the things or feel some kind of normalcy, and being able to design these tools and design these games kind of gave that back to them a little bit.
Right.
And got them ready for the school year. It took some of that stress away.
For sure.
That's pretty cool.
And I heard some other, what I think is also really powerful about it and what you shared is students had a voice and they had choice, which I think are two powerful tools to really engage the learner. They recognize their voice is important and being utilized. Definitely. And they're having choices in a task they want to tackle of what they're passionate about, what they're connected to, which I think, really is one of the cornerstones, those two words, voice and choice, with engagement as well. And that seemed to provide all of that for your students. So super cool.
Definitely.
We're going to come back and keep talking about that and pull out some more ideas from what you're doing. Amelia, I want to switch over to you because I know that you are with American Reading Company and they have a unique way to go about engaging students in reading. And as I was out on the web today and on Twitter, I just stumbled upon, so I think it was serendipitous, I just stumbled upon a tweet by Julian, and she put in here, she had a tweet up that said, I should go back and say, she's an aspiring writer, and she's actually written her fantasy novels. So she had tweeted that she hopes in her lifetime to be a famous published author. So our job here is to make that happen for you, Julian. Her tweet says, learning to read for the first time was my favorite earliest memory. It's like the world suddenly had this limitless newness to me. I could read anything and everything I wanted to. There was nothing I couldn't do if I had books with me. And I thought that would be an awesome way to segue over to Amelia telling us, how do you at American Reading Company engage young learners in reading?
So I think at a personal level, like developing this reader identity is critical, right? So kids understanding the purpose payoff of literacy in their lives, seeing that they can learn something more about themselves, about others, about how the world works, even the unfairness of the world right now, right? In learning like new skills, are they feeling pushed?
I like that term, reader identity.
Yes, I think it's critical, right? Their brain muscles, their reading muscles have to grow. But part of this, of the reader identity is, do they see themselves as belonging? Do they see themselves represented in the text that they can choose from? Do they really matter? If they don't see themselves, if the way we curate books do not allow all kids to see themselves, then we're failing some kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their ideas, experiences are reflected in what they read. And are they inspired to act from what they are reading? So I think there is this ideal goal that you have to have clarity. Engagement is more than liking, right? It's understanding the purpose, the payoff, and the power that is behind that. But once we are in a school, and some of this, Shanae just talked about voice and choice. And I think we really try to create a vibrant community of learners, of readers, writers, where kids can read aloud, talk about it, write, share, debate together with a teacher that is also a reader. You're not going to promote reading, engaged reading in kids if you have teachers that are not readers. It's not going to happen, right?
Mm.
So I think
there's power in that statement. The teacher has to be a reader.
Yeah. So what we do, that is our secret sauce. We give teachers and kids access to hook books, like books that are really way too good to resist. And many of those books are read aloud. So the teachers get hooked on the books, even if they were not readers before, right? So then they discuss the books, and and it's amazing. The other day I was modeling this, and I read a small piece of an introduction. My teacher's an alien. In the introduction, there's a part that talks about a kid that is bullied and how this teacher steps up. And at the end, this student that just heard the introduction raised his hand and he said, "Can I have this book?" And I said, "Sure, you can have this book." But afterwards, the teacher said that he suffered from a condition that sometimes caused him to be bullied. And that book immediately spoke to him, right? So all of a sudden, the teacher was sold on it, right? So bringing the best books, promoting the conditions for kids to read and share aloud as a community, debate, but also build time for kids to engage in these delicious self-selected books. We have to build their muscles starting in school. If they read every day, talk every day, write every day, becomes a part of their identity of who they are. But the last part that I'm going to talk about right now is making sure that you have rotating libraries. So there are lots of choices. So when we send, like, let's say there are 5 fifth grade teachers that teach in a building, each teacher gets 10 baskets of different books. And then after 6 weeks or 8 weeks, they rotate. And so baskets for classroom 1 go to classroom 2, and so forth. So classroom 1 now gets 10 baskets that are brand new. And kids have multi-level, multicultural, multi-perspective, historically accurate books.
Love that. I remember when you started at American Reading Company, and I came out to visit you in the warehouse with Corey Urai, who is one of my vice presidents. And when we went into the warehouse, and you had all of the baskets of books that are all different color coded baskets, and I remember, Corey was like a kid at Christmas. She's looking up at all of these baskets, and she just said, "I remember these from my classroom," and I thought that was so great. It just shows you the power of what you're doing at American Reading Company. So thank you for that. Yeah. It's powerful. All right, so let's take a look at the perspective of football. And Peter, now tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you're engaging students in learning on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been blown away by the other two examples by Reed and Amelia. Amelia's phrase about they've got these delicious books that are just too good to resist. We've got a game and a sport that most of the children in England think is just too good to resist. So we don't have a problem with children coming to football practice or to soccer practice. What we did have was a real issue with the way that football was served up to them once they arrived there. So too often, we actually killed all their enthusiasm and that joy of learning by giving them drills and activities and things to do that took them too far away from what football meant to them. And so once we realized and we began to adopt or change our approach, we actually gave the game back to the children because that's what they came to do. And rather than teaching them the joy of football, we integrated it with the joy of learning. It just happened that we were learning about football. So we almost tried to create the perfect storm.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
I used to be a soccer player, so I remember the drills and the going, but just the love of the game and understanding that, practice makes you do well in the thing that you love doing, which was doing the game. But it is a fun sport with your teammates and the love of that. And I feel like that same thing is a lot in education too. When kids come to K, or even, I'm looking at my 4-year-old niece, she just likes to learn and do things. Like, how do we make sure that we continue to make that exciting and engaging of why kids want to, come to school, participate in sports and all of that without like stifling their natural inquisitiveness.
Yeah. Well, we talk about.
I have to share that when Nancy came into my schools, we started in kindergarten in 3rd grade. The kindergartners had no problem with it because they had never been schooled. They took on, but the 3rd and 4th graders, they had a hard time adjusting because they had already been schooled and they had to unlearn, like Pete is saying.
Yeah. Well, and I love, Pete, the phrase that you gave the game back to the students. Yeah. And I feel like that's a little bit of a thread too, Amelia, with the way that you go about reading is giving the joy of reading back to the students with books in which they are represented, books that they get to choose. And then Reed, you just talked about the fact that you also, you kind of gave the learning back to the students because you engaged them in a problem they wanted to solve and gave them choice and voice throughout. So I love that theme. And if that's something that we can take away tonight as how do we give the learning back to the students?
For sure.
Any thoughts on that?
Today I was working with a group of teachers and I was surprised at how much they revert back to the thinking that if the kids are not in front of me, they are not learning.
Yeah.
We really had to revisit that because we are at a cusp of transformation and school will never look the same. I know I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's not going to look the same. So
for sure.
We need to revisit this multiple times for people to process it.
For sure. And I think to something Reed was talking about earlier of understanding what the kids want. And I think that is a lot in what Reed was sharing and what Pete was sharing. It's like, okay, her first and second graders are coming in like, we don't understand what none of this is. Y'all done pulled us out of school with no real explanation that we understand. Y'all talking about we not going back. Like, what's really happening? And so understanding what they wanted to get invested in and what was bringing them to the table, I think is key. Like, what is it that kids want to know about and want to solve and be the solution for? Even at 5 and 6, they're like, we can figure out something with this social distancing. We can put something in place. 5, 6, it don't matter how old we are, but you brought something that was relevant to them, that they came, so they're wanting to do something of purpose. And I think that we don't often give kids enough credit for them knowing what they want to do and why they're choosing to like come and be there, which I think Reed was able to really, use, and why all of Pete said, the kids come because they love soccer, they love football. Yeah. How do we keep that up?
Right. I think all the time too, like as adults, we make decisions for ourselves all day long. As soon as we leave high school, we go to college, or you learn your career and you get to make these choices all the time. But sometimes we lose sight of that and we don't give our kids the choices that they deserve and the reasons why we say no sometimes. So I think when we can put them in the driver's seat like that and explain to them why we make the choices that they do, and let them make choices sometimes that we know might not be the greatest, but they can learn from it, I think is really where the learning and the engagement and the inspiration will happen for them.
Yeah. And I think it's so hard for many educators, coaches, those of us who are working with youngsters, to allow them to fail. What is so hard about allowing them to fail and teaching them that it's okay to fail? We can fail forward, and that we learn from those mistakes, because children at the very youngest level, it reminds me of a book by Frank Smith, The Book of Learning and Forgetting, in which he talks about the fact that children learn so much before they hit school. Yeah. And it's all just natural learning. So why is it that we think in school suddenly, or, for Pete to have a structured program, a football program, why is it that we have to think that they need us to structure the learning, and why not just give it back to them and tap into those early roots?
I think what you're talking about, Nancy, is developing an emotional connection with, for us, soccer or football, but also an emotional connection to learning, so that it's both positive and memorable. And I think if your first experiences of trying anything new are positive and memorable, there's a really good chance that you're going to revisit it and want to go back, and you're motivated to continue that kind of learning. And we've tried to bring that into the way that we present soccer to the young children that come to us. And it's a leap of faith, but we are asking coaches to read the children, involve them more. Shanae used the word, voice and choice. It's so important that we give the children that kind of opportunity to develop them, not just as soccer players, but to develop them as young people as well. So we've had a bit of I call it a leap of faith, but we're getting some real traction now.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I feel like we need some air snaps, Nancy, because I want to be like, emoji, yes.
All right.
Thumbs up.
We'll work on that for the next show today.
So I'm just going to, when you see me doing like this, it means I co-sign and agree.
All right.
I like it.
Everybody now. All right, here we go.
So
actually, let's just take a break from the conversation for my segment that I call What's in Your Mug? So today I have chosen to drink from a mug with Frida Kahlo's face on it. Now, Frida Kahlo is probably Mexico's most famous artist. And she was studying, actually, pre-med, taking a bus back and forth to college when she was in a horrific accident, and she ended up being flat on her back in a full body cast. And it was then that she decided, she needed to do something different. She decided that perhaps she wanted to take up painting. So her parents figured out how to rig up a special canvas over her bed, put a mirror over her bed, and she painted her first painting, which was a self-portrait. And interestingly enough, through her career, she painted over 140 paintings, about 55 of which were self-portraits. And I was very fortunate on my 60th birthday, which wasn't too long ago, that my daughter, shout out Kristen, took me to Mexico City to literally see Casa Azul, which is the house that she grew up in, lived in, and died in. And I got to see that bed that was rigged up for her to learn. And I thought, now there was a situation that created a felt need to learn, and that she obviously capitalized on while she was laid up in bed recovering. So shout out to the spirit of Frida Kahlo and that kind of living. And I am drinking a Gevalia signature blend mild roast coffee. Turning it over to you, Shanae. What's in your mug?
So I'm on aunt duty this weekend. So my cup is filled with apple juice. Because I gave some to Mia. So I was like, I'll just put apple juice in my cup.
Reed, what are you drinking? What's in your mug?
Well, you'd think it was tea, wouldn't you? But it's actually lemon and ginger tea.
And Pete, show us the front of that mug. All right, who knows where that's from? Live audience.
Great.
Put it in the chat. Where is that from? We will come back to you. Reed, what's in your mug?
I am drinking a caramel macchiato with an extra shot of espresso because hybrid teaching is kind of hard.
It's a wonderful thing. Amelia,
definitely need a little pick-me-up.
Amelia, what's in your mug?
So I am drinking hot chocolate with a homemade mix, and my mug is all white because I didn't want to come with any preconceived ideas. I wanted to learn.
That's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing. And I
love it.
The home audience apparently does watch Friends.
Yes.
And Pete, just hold up that mug one more time.
Here we go.
The Central Perk. I remember it well. So while we're taking this coffee, apple juice, tea, caramel macchiato break, I would like to thank the International Broadcast Media for having this channel, for building this network of shows. And if you've never been to ibmtv.tv, you need to go because they have amazing shows. And I know you may have seen the first show that I was on, my buddy Mark Lee, who hosts on Wednesday nights from 4 to 7, the online dinner party, which was always a lot of fun. So definitely got to hang out with those guys. And Money Masters PBS, which operates that. And our executive producers, Nick and Kim. And then behind the scenes, we have Nguyen Phan, who is our director. And he is joined by, I'll call them our junior directors from IDE, Carrie Gentner and Boyd Edelson, who are working to learn how to run this whole show. So we very much appreciate that. And now let's pick up with the second half of the show. Shanae.
Yes. So love especially the thread that we've been able to talk through about, the power of giving the learning back to the students and that level of engagement. And so really thinking about why at that young age, why is it important for us to really engage students in the learning? So like the contrast of what happens if we don't, you know what I mean? Like what happens when we don't engage our learners? So why is it so important and so powerful that we catch kids early to make sure that we are, engaging them?
Thoughts?
Well, can I have a go at that? Because
yes, Pete.
And the way we've approached it really challenged our whole tradition of coach education, because our coach education system is designed to help coaches identify mistakes to a really high degree. And what they would do, having been trained to that level, would go and watch their players play and identify mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. So you can imagine the motivation levels of the children involved in the practice, where they were continually told that they weren't doing this right, you're not so good at that, you just made a mistake. So we flipped it completely on its head. And we asked the coaches to begin to notice what the children were doing well and use that as the baseline and the starting point for all of the help, advice, and guidance that they were going to give from there.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think that whole idea of start with the positive and then you can continue to, and I think that is true of reading, right, Amelia? I mean, isn't that what we do in reading as well?
Yeah, it is. And I think, Nancy, when we think about the world in which we live right now and the role that kids can play to make the world better, and there's power and privilege that comes with literacy. And I think the power and the privilege has to be shared. So from early on, giving kids choice and voice in terms like helping kids not to just read passively, but read actively and say, what is the author telling me? Do I agree with this? Do I not? What else do I want to know? How do I feel about this, right? What is fair here? Whose voice is not represented here? So critical literacy is very important. And if we teach kids passively as they come in with nothing, we are sending a very powerful message that is not the best message to make an impact.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, so in my classroom, using the Learner Active Technology Infused classroom, they do the same thing where we're the little humans that we teach, we're creating them to be these people in our societies that we want to be effective, allowing them to schedule their days and allowing them to choose how they want to learn something. Like, do I want to sit with my teacher? Do I want to learn this in a video? Do I want to read instructions on this? And how am I going to apply these skills that I learn? Giving them that little choice and allowing them to be in the driver's seat really makes them want to do it. It's like when your mom would tell you to go clean your room as a teenager, you're like, no, I don't want to. But if she wouldn't tell me for a week, it would be spotless. Letting them take control of it and realizing what they can do with the skills that they learn, I think is extremely powerful. And it applies to reading, it applies to math, it applies to soccer, like letting them see the outcomes that they're producing.
So your advice to parents is to not tell them to have their kids clean the room.
Let them see
let them
see the outcomes. Let them explore a little bit.
I know. So they shouldn't go the route that I go, that if I am so busy that I just haven't had time to do laundry, I buy more clothes.
Perhaps not.
All right. Maybe
I do that sometimes too.
Maybe that's not the good life lesson.
What I heard Pete say and also Reed say is that somebody has to break with tradition. Somebody has, and like, if we think about ourselves, adult readers, right? When we come across a book we don't like, we stop reading it. When we come across a book we love, we want to talk about it. We don't fill out a Venn diagram. Right? So what are we asking kids to do?
That's great. I remember years ago, I was working with some first grade teachers and they came and they said, we're trying to teach character setting and plot. And we've come up with a really good problem-based task because so much of my work has been helping people with problem-based tasks. And I said, all right, what is it? And they said, well, the kids are going to read these books and then they're going to create these Venn diagrams. And I'm like, oh, a Venn diagram. That is so authentic. Every time I go to read a book, I sit down and draw out a Venn diagram right away. They started laughing and I'm like, what is authentic about that? So I said, what if instead you said to a child, read some books and then pick out one that is your favorite author. And then once you figure out who is one of your favorite authors, write that author a letter to see if they would write their next book about your community. And in order to do that, of course, you're going to need to understand, well, what kind of settings do they use? And is your argument going to have to be that it's similar to where you live or that it's different from the kinds of books you've been writing? And then the same thing, you need to know the character, the setting, the plot to convince them. the kids went wild with this. They were writing off to authors. We had some authors write back because now it's authentic. There's a real world audience. There's a reason. You're not just doing a Venn diagram. I mean, remember, I wrote a book on executive function. Venn diagrams have their role. They have not necessarily as the purpose for reading.
Yeah.
Right. It's a good stepping stone. It gets you where you need to be, but it's not the end goal. The end goal of reading this story is not for a Venn diagram. The end goal of reading a story is for your enjoyment. The Venn diagram is in the process of understanding the text.
Yes. It's an activity that you can do as you're moving along to get to that greater end, because I'm guessing, Reed, that in the summer program, the students had to read.
Yeah, they had to read. They had to learn about measurement. They had to understand how far apart 6 feet is, you know? That was a big skill for them. So being able to take those tasks and infuse learning within it makes it so much more powerful and meaningful to them because they're applying it. I think one of the issues is if you could just let kids let them take on whatever they're doing. If it's a task in school, a problem they want to solve, if it's playing football, and then watch what the students are doing and then decide how can you build more skills in. I think that learning could be so enhanced, but I think everyone is afraid to just look at the situation and figure out how to fit in the skills.
Agreed.
Yeah.
We've taken a lot from education, Nancy, and one of the best experiences I had was at the Centre for Research in Early Childhood, which is in the centre of the UK. And I went to observe some teachers there working with some children, and they planned their curriculum retrospectively. So they allowed the children to play. And then when they saw what the children were interested in or where their attention had been taken, at the end of the day, the staff got together and tried to look at ways where they could extend the learning if the child engaged with the same activity on the next day. So it was completely child-led. And it just made so much sense, and there was so much engagement from the young children. We've almost tried to model that within soccer, because we have what's called an arrival activity. So as soon as the children come, they play football. And the coach then has to work with how the children are playing the game to look for opportunities to extend the learning and to offer help, support and guidance where they can. So we've really taken a lot. You also mentioned the executive functioning skills. We've really begun to dig a little bit deeper into this about how we can help the children can help us plan, organize, and then reflect upon their sessions and the games that they've had. So we've really tried to grasp this concept of looking at that broader development of those wider executive functional skills. And it is paying real dividends because the children are so engaged.
Yeah, you know that I'll be inviting you back when I do a segment on executive function, because I was so intrigued in our discussion around you can learn a sport and there are skills to the sport, but the best players know more than the skills. They know the strategies, and you don't get to strategies without executive function.
Yeah, for sure. And so, to Pete's point too, and kind of back to what I was thinking about in my question earlier, the power of giving students at that young age that voice, that choice, finding out what it is that they're interested in to engage them. I think it then also helps them start to learn who they are as learners. Definitely. And that can only help propel you as you move through upper elementary, middle, high, and beyond. So when you start to understand how you learn best, because you were able to engage in the things that you wanted to, the types of books and things that connected with you or that you were really, interested in, all of that starts to inform who that student is as a learner. So as part of their, then learner identity, right? Oh, thanks, P. You gave me the snaps. I saw it. But that's important because, I taught middle school. And so oftentimes kids are just like, just lead me to the next thing from here, there. I don't know If you don't tell me to go left, I'm not going to go left. I'm like, children, clearly 3 + 3 is not 7. Why did y'all write that on y'all's paper? I was clearly thinking about something else. Well, you wrote it on the book. But if kids are like understand who they are as a learner, then they don't become so dependent upon the one person giving them the instruction. Like, that's the power of engagement. That's the power of giving kids that voice and choice, because it starts to help them identify who they are, you know?
Right.
And Shanae, what makes me sad is that the kids that are most underserved in our country, in our schools, are the ones that get the least, that get what they need the least. They are removed from all authentic experiences, and they are just killed with drills and skills and drills and skills, and they never read a book from cover to cover. They don't have a book whisperer, and I think that this is really a question of justice and equity.
For sure.
We have to change the narrative to change the outcomes. We're not going to help the most underserved kids by giving them skills and removing all authentic experiences.
Yeah, I know.
Kids don't want to read. That's really the power too. They're like, I hate reading. I hate math. I'm not good at it. I'm like, well, if you got money in your pocket, if you can count, then we starting somewhere. So somewhere, like someone's crushed you along the way to make you feel that way, that you don't love reading or you don't love writing or you don't love math because it no longer engaged you. And that's the thing that they don't like. I'm no longer attracted to that particular content area for whatever the reason is. So that's why engagement, authenticity, relevance, finding kids' passion, all of that it needs to be done constantly, for students.
I agree. I think even going back to the basics of it too. I love what you said, Amelia, and what you said too, Pete. Like, you let them just go to soccer practice and start off playing soccer. They're not starting off with those skills and those drills. And I think that's the way we need to start everything. When you're going into a reading block, giving a short mini lesson, letting them go off and letting them read, letting them immerse themselves and lose themselves in these books. And then you can slide in and give a little reading conference, talk about the problem, the solution, the characters in the book, and they're engaged and they're ready to tell you because they've been absorbed in this book. You're not just handing them a text and drilling them with questions. They're telling you about it and they're taking that control. So I think anytime you can give the control back to students, you're going to see their engagement is just so much more.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of Daniel Pink's book, Drive. If you've read, Daniel Pink wrote a book just about, I think it's called The Drive, the unexpected truth of what motivates people. And he basically said through his research that there are 3 things that motivate people. One is mastery, meaning that you see that there's the possibility of you learning. There's a path to mastery, purpose, and autonomy. And if you think about it, and I'd like each of you to think about, how does mastery, autonomy, and purpose play out in the way you engage students? Who wants to be up first?
I mean, I could take it if you want people to marinate. It's one of my words. Let it marinate on your spirit.
Let you marinate on the mastery, autonomy, and purpose.
For sure. I think autonomy goes back to that voice choice aspect too, of feeling like, I know when, as an adult learner even, that I want to make sure that I'm good at whatever it is that I'm doing, that I want to master it, but also not feeling that I am being micromanaged. And kids don't want to feel like they're micromanaged either. So I often think about, as adults, do you enjoy being micromanaged by someone? Most adults say, no, give me the task and let me go forth. And so I think we have to think of students, in that same way of like, here's our problem, what it is that we're trying to do. And I'm giving you some choices. You have voice in what we're doing. So that's giving you that autonomy to really move forward. And I think purpose, back to something Pete said earlier, like the kids came because they want to be here. They're coming in with I want to learn how to play football, soccer for us American folk. I want to learn to do that. I want to have fun. I want to hang out with my friends and do that. So they're already coming in with their own purpose of why they want to be there. And so it's a matter of making sure it doesn't get, squandered. So I think if we think about what kids' purpose is for being, wanting to read, wanting to write, wanting to do math, what is it that they want to do with their life or their life right now? Because at 5, you probably don't know, whatever that case is, really thinking about how that all plays in.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask the backstage directors to leave Shanae up on the screen and put the banner ticker up again. I just want our audience to see that for our speakers, as we are winding down, you will notice that we have their names and their Twitter handles. And please follow our guests, learn more about them, see what they're talking about. As I hope you can tell, we've got some fascinating people here tonight. So now on to mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Amelia, you want to put your 2 cents in?
So thinking back about when I was an assistant superintendent, I was visiting a high school class for kids that had reading difficulties. So those kids were taken away from their electives and they were put in a double block of reading, right? But American Reading Company, a coach was there working with a teacher. And at the end of a conference with a student, this other kid got up from his seat and he went to the ARC coach and he said, "How much is this book?" And the ARC coach said, "What?" He said, "I need to buy this book. This is what I have needed all my life." And when I think about what we do for reading is we have organized, because skills are important, but they have to be laid out in a road that shows that you're going somewhere. And I think what is really important about American Reading is that they created a reading taxonomy that really helps teachers and kids take the mystery out of reading. So understand where they are, what they are already doing well, and what they need to do next to get better. And I think if you cannot do that for kids that need this direction, they need a GPS and they will find their way. Yeah, you are making them worse. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I love that. Read, mastery, autonomy, purpose. What are your parting thoughts? As I can't believe this hour is almost over with.
I know.
I can't believe it either. I totally agree with everything that Amelia just said. I think she said it beautifully. I think it's really important as a special education teacher as well to meet every kid where they are. Mastery for every student is going to look completely different. And I think celebrating those milestones, celebrating everything that they're doing is going to continue to motivate them to get them where they need to be. We need to find ways to break apart tasks. Like the big summer program we did, it was broken into tasks and steps. Then it was clearly laid out. Like, if you want to design a tool, here's the learning you need to do. Here's some of the practice you need to do. Then go ahead and design it and advertise it. They need things broken apart for them, and they need to see those successes and those victories in those smaller steps, just like we do. Every day through our lives, we like being complimented. We like being told that we're doing a good job and feeling rewarded. And our kids are the same way.
Absolutely. And I see that Fiona Borland has a comment here. Freedom in learning is an equity issue. And I think what you're showing, Reed, in the project that you were involved in, and plus I know that this is the way that you teach during the school year through problem-based learning and allowing kids to schedule their own time and select what they're doing, that really creates a level of equity that isn't available to a lot of students, and something that schools are grappling with right now. And then Pete, let's see, we have someone here, Danita Ishibashi has written, all teachers need to hear Pete speak about teaching and learning. So Pete, are you ready to go on the road as a keynote speaker?
Yes, I'm ready.
So what are your thoughts on football and this idea of, obviously there's a purpose that's built in, which is a beautiful thing, about teaching football. So let's talk a little bit about the path to mastery and autonomy.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Reed and Amelia's point, and they've made it so clearly. We've introduced the coaches to a quote from Albert Einstein that says that love is a much better teacher than a sense of duty. And if the children come to soccer because they love it, that should be the starting point. And then as they're playing, we've got an opportunity to, they're obviously going to feel more competent the better they get at playing soccer. But it must be on their terms, not me saying, well, you're not very good at this, and if you were, you'd be able to do this. You almost want the children to say, Pete, will you help me get better at this? Because that will allow me to do this. And I think that's the kind of situation we can get to if we build a really strong connection with the child. And you can only get that if you really take time to get to know them. And you build that really strong relationship and that trust between you. And that is the basis for everything else that follows. But we want children to feel as though they can accomplish anything. And that has to start with a lot of positivity, but also then honest feedback and really supportive guidance and help, so that we support them in them attempting to do whatever they want to do. And I think it's so important that they drive it, not us.
That is such a key. If we could let the students drive the learning situation and let us be the coaches, the facilitators, the curators of their experience, would be a wonderful thing.
We had a real issue in the UK because there's a phrase that the coach always wears the crown, and we want to take the crown off the coach and place it on the heads of the children.
I love that. That's great. A wonderful thing. All right. So parting thoughts. If obviously, if you love Reed McMurray and want her to be, your child's teacher, well, you have to move to Randolph, New Jersey. Reed, what advice would you give for teachers, parents, anybody out there as to one idea you have for how to better engage students in grappling?
I would say find their interests and play off of that. Last year with my kids, I had a leveled library, and one day with my kids, I said, you know what? This isn't working. We took all the books, we dumped them all over the floor, and I said, let's make some categories for our library. And together we built a category-based library, and their reading scores, it was insane the amounts that they were reading then, because they were engaged in things that they like. Help your kids find their interests and play off of them. Teach them through their interests, and they're always going to be engaged, and they're going to be so successful because they're doing what they want to do and they're learning from it.
Right. That because you gave over their classroom library to them.
Yeah. It's like,
that's good. And if you want your child, or if you yourself want to be working with the world's greatest football coach, then you're going to have to move to the UK. And give us your final thoughts, Pete.
I've just written something down here, and I think it's a great thing to remember. We don't want any soccer coach in England to be a child's last coach, because if you are, you've really, missed a fantastic opportunity for you to work with a young person who has got so much potential. And if you're their last coach, you've really missed that opportunity.
Thank you. That's a good one. And if you love Amelia Larson, then you're just going to have to get to know the American Reading Company better and bring them into your school system. So, Amelia, what are your final parting thoughts?
First, I want to write a book about reading with Pete. But other than that, I think reading and soccer have a lot in common.
I want to write a book with Pete.
Oh, good. Let's do it.
We'll all write a book with Pete.
I think that from my heart, maintain high expectations. Use the assets that they all have assets. And fight really hard so zip code, language, and race stop predicting outcomes. We can do this. We can do this.
Thank you. And Shanae, my fabulous co-host for the evening, thank you very much. Your parting thoughts.
This has been fun. The hour went very quickly. But this is a great
really
conversation. Did. And the thread, I think, is to Reed's point, find what the kids want to do and do that thing. Find out what they want, and then you work your teacher into what it is that they're already bringing. And I think that's how we can really engage students.
So Amelia, Reed, Pete, Shanae, thank you so much for being on this opening show and kicking it off. I love you. I appreciate you being here. And for the live audience, you were blowing up the chat. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much. I can't wait to go back and read all of the comments and see where we're at. I hope that you enjoyed the show. I hope that you will come on back to us. I know we're heading into a holiday season, but I still need you to come back here. Next week, we will be discussing technology as the game changer in learning. The following week is Christmas Eve, and my show will be focused on my favorite things in learning. And then on New Year's Eve, we will be discussing revisiting learning in 2020 or not. So in my company, one of the things that I do, first, I would be remiss if I didn't say it's a very special night tonight. It is the first night of Hanukkah. So for all of our friends who are celebrating Hanukkah, we wish you the very best. And as we move into the new year, we hope for an amazing 2021. So my company partners with schools to position students to change the world. So I thought that the best way to end my show would be with the voices of children. So thank you. See you next week. Change the world, and watch this little clip right to the end.
Thanks for watching Learning Unwrapped.
My advice to teachers is to listen to their students when they tell them how they like to learn. For example, I like listening to music when I learn.
I like remote learning because I can work at my own pace.
Yeah, I love to read books, so I just don't know what the letters are, but I'm trying to learn how the letters are.
Tune next Thursday to talk about technology and learning.
Good catch.